Oops. Yeah, so we'd love to hear from all of you, but we've decided, just in the interest of time and at risk of technological issues, that we're not going to start with a round of introductions. But we do ask that if you have questions at the end, at that time you can introduce yourselves to us, and then if we have time left over, we will try and hear from everybody and get to know each other on this Zoom. So I'll just do a brief introduction of CFTC and then we'll get into the presentations. So CFTC was formed as a charity in 1986, working to alleviate hunger and poverty-related issues internationally. Our head office is in Toronto, and then we have country offices in 4 countries internationally, and then in Winnipeg, where Nicole and I are based. The vision of CFTC is a world where children thrive free from poverty. In 1992, CFTC began working in Canada with a focus on alleviating childhood hunger. So it's been 27 years since we've been working here. And over the 12 past years, our work has really evolved into more of a focus on food security towards food sovereignty. And we've expanded to quite a few new nations and communities. So the map on this slide actually shows 21 of the locations where we're working, and we've recently partnered with 5 new nations this year, so we'll have to update our map yet again. And so in Canada, our approach is to work with both community-based staff and with partners to support community-led sustainable solutions towards food sovereignty. And the range of programs are really diverse. There's quite a broad array, which you would hope to see if you were truly doing community-led work. So we're very pleased to be able to host this first learning session. It's something we've wanted to do for quite some time. We also hope to someday do some in person, but for now we're going to try and make best use of this technology that's available to us. And then, yes, hopefully have more regular sessions like this one. So I'll introduce the 2 presenters for the session, Glenna Cayen and Steve Wiig. So Glenna is a community program coordinator in Muskeg Lake Cree Nation and is a staff person with CFTC. And Steve is a permaculture design expert and owner of Holistic Landscape and Design. And he'll be sharing his expertise with us today, and he's been really involved with the Food Forest Project in Muskeg Lake. So as the agenda showed, Glenn and Steve will each be sharing a presentation, and then we will have questions. So we ask you to hold your questions to the end. You can type them at any time in the chat box as we go along, or save them for the end of the presentation. So thanks very much, Glenna and Steve, for sharing your time and knowledge with us today, and I will hand it over to you.
Great, thank you, Erica, and I appreciate everyone who is on this webinar. Thank you for joining us. So this photo is a picture of Steve. I thought maybe I should put this in. Steve Wiig, myself, and Chief Kelly Wolf of the Muskeg Lake Cree Nation. And we were, this was a planting day last October, and it was a very cold day with minus 39, not minus 39, 39 kilometer winds. Muskeg Lake Cree Nation was established in 1881, and it's centrally located in Saskatchewan. We're in Treaty 6 territory. There are 2,200, approximately 2,200 band members on the membership list, with 380 on reserve. I would say most of the on reserve population, probably 50%, 60% are children and youth. Some notable things about Muskeg is that we were one of the first urban reserves in Canada. This would have happened about 25 years ago through the treaty land entitlement process. So we purchased commercial property in Saskatoon, and we have a number of First Nation organizations that have their business there, and it's quite a quite an interesting little area in Saskatoon. The other thing to note about Muskeg is that we have one of the highest number of veterans in Canada that are from our reserve. Also, one of the policies that Indian Affairs had put us through is when veterans came back from the wars, they were given land. And then First Nations veterans were given land within the reserve. So they're called CP holders. And so we have a lot of these CP holders in Muskeg. And at times it has created issues, and there is not a lot of communal land available. So our project, the Food Forest Project, part of our vision, and this came, with consultation from the elders, chief and council, a food security committee, was to ensure that we establish a Cree relationship with the land. A lot of First Nations within Canada, it's quite known that we're losing our language, and our teachings are part of the Cree language and the universal laws, and that keeps us grounded and it reconnects us with spirituality. And I think being Cree, that is part of our spirituality. So the language is so important, and reviving traditions, taking care of the land and ourselves was part of this, and I think the Food Forest touches on that because it's of the ethical, land ethics that resonate with permaculture design, and for sure, being food secure is really important with climate change. We don't know what's going to happen, and I think this is a proactive way to deal with that, meaning the food forest. And we want to have a place where the community can gather and it's functional, and there's going to be a bountiful harvest when everything starts growing in 2, 3, 5, 10 years. This slide is the piece of land where the food forest is located. So it's 2.5 acres. It was very lush soil. Prior to the food forest, it was leased to non-First Nations and for farming. So when you think of it, this is just 13 months ago. There was nothing on this piece of land. Now we have, it fenced in. We have lots of plants and an elder's rest area, a shed, a restroom. And again, they're, referring back to the CP holders, there was not a lot of land to select in Muskeg. So this was, we were lucky to get this piece of land for our forest. When I first started with Canadian Feed the Children, which would have been about 2 years ago, I was like, okay, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? What can I get going here? So I started with organizing a garden and greenhouse course, and that was held in February of 2018. And I was in contact with Earth Connections, a gentleman by the name of Frank Tecklenburg. So part of the 5-day course, we learned about composting, soil health, organic farming, microgreens, safety in the workplace, greenhouses, cold frames, and permaculture design principles. So this is where I met Steve Wiig, and I became intrigued with the food forest and how it all started, because I really like the idea that I remember Steve had said if you put a lot of input in at the beginning, then there's less to do when the food forest starts flourishing and growing. So I thought, hey, that's a great project for Muskeg, and it's unique. And so I had struck a food security committee. It involved chief and council, members from the community, directors, managers from the band office. And I needed their guidance and help and commitment along the way. And they were, excited about this. So we started from there, and that was in April. And then we started the planning of the food forest in August. And that's when we did community consultation. We did a food security survey to see what our members wanted. Another workshop that we had was Plants as Food Medicine. That happened last February. It focused on reclamation of ancestral food traditions and the holistic wellness that is found in returning the land from health, culture, and healing. So it was all about growing food as medicine, and to have a place that acts in a medicinal way is a healing place or space. So that's one of the other things that I'm interested in working on, is a medicinal garden, perhaps as phase 3. We're holding another workshop this weekend, and it's all about maintaining the food forest and getting it ready for winter. So that will happen this coming weekend. This is a photo of our presentation to the elders. Our elders meet every 3 months. So I was fortunate to get on the agenda, and we told them, who CFTC was and what our plans are and what permaculture design is all about. This is an aerial view of the food forest. And as you can see, it's nicely located on Paddling Lake, and it's on one of the main roads in Muskeg. And this is 2.5 acres, and there's an elders rest area. I have another photo that you'll see a bit closer. And we plan to do workshops, and it's just a nice area to be. So some of the key areas that are going to benefit Muskeg Lake Cree Nation with the Food Forest Initiative, it's all about land use for sustainability and economic development. Producing food for residents, saving on your food bill. Even though we are close, we are central Saskatchewan, the little towns are very expensive to buy food, especially for low income people. So, we could potentially have a market garden. We could sell our produce at our gas stations. It definitely is all about food security and being proactive with climate change and those issues that, we don't know what's coming down with that. With health, we all know that, diabetes and obesity rates are high in First Nation communities. So having locally grown fresh fruit and, vegetables are going to be great. We can can this produce for the winter, and it's going to be healthy food for our community, and hopefully get people back to eating more nutritious, healthy foods. With the education part, this is going to be a big focus in the food forest. I'm not sure about the East and Ontario, but I know in Western Canada, there's a big focus on land-based education. A lot of our schools are, showing the children like skinning hides and drying meat and snaring rabbits, and a lot of the traditional ways. So this goes hand in hand. It's all about integrating the curriculum from the education system with First Nations culture. So it's connecting with Mother Earth, and we can have summer courses, workshops. We can invite residents and visitors to the food forest. So really looking forward to what we can do. And of course, it's a healthy way to get out out and get exercise and, you know, feel connected to the land and get your hands dirty and just have fun. And we're hoping our kids can be part of that and learn about, you know, growing our own food and being sustainable. This is a picture of wood chips. So had I not been part of sourcing wood chips in the area, or, you know, trying to get lands or health to pay for our dump trucks of wood chips that we had to order, you would have no idea how many truckloads of wood chips. I think it's 20 plus that we have had, and I'm sure by this weekend we will use all the wood chips. Steve Wiig will talk more about soil health and the benefits of the wood chips in his presentation, so I'll move on. But it's I can't believe how many or how much wood chips we've used in this project. So this is just a list of what we planted. Last October was our phase 1 of planting. So we have like 140 apple trees, and there were 5 varieties. Some of the varieties, they'll be ready in August, some in September, some are good for juicing. Some of the apple trees store well till January. We've had 40 plum trees with 3 varieties, cherry trees, Saskatoon berry bushes, and then some to attract like mountain ash, which attracts the birds, and birch trees, which are used as windbreaks. So that was a total of 360 trees and bushes that were planted. As you can see, on May 23rd, we planted around like 500 more trees and shrubs. So I won't list all of them, but you know, we did consult the elders, and a lot of them wanted cranberries and chokecherries. We've lost a lot of our berry patches from, I guess, mainstream you know, chemicals and farming practices in the area. So there isn't a lot of areas to go and pick berries anymore. Some of the lilacs and Virginia creeper, like, they're going to be used for beautification and just, you know, habitat for wildlife and nesting birds. And the seed buckthorn and haskcaps are like a superfood. So really good nutrition, and haskcaps are being sliced from the U of S, and they've been working on that for the past 10 years, and I believe haskcaps have been brought in from Russia, so they grow really well in our climate. So we're trying them, even though, you know, the community probably isn't very aware of haskcaps. So that's going to be an interesting one. Here are some photos of our planting days. So this one, like on the left, top left, are 2 elders. One is my mom. She's 88, Leona Lindsay. The one on the right, her name is Nora Ledoux. She's the matriarch for Muskeg Lake Cree Nation. She just turned 90 this year. So I was really happy that they came out and supported us. These are some of the kids getting involved. We have a close relationship with Leask and Blaine Lake and their students. So we would invite them to come and help plant and be part of our planting days. So I think even Steve was a bit overwhelmed because we had lots of kids and lots of help planting. So it was really awesome. And here again are some more pictures of planting days. A lot of the kids were happy and enthusiastic. Some started out not too excited and then got excited about it. So that was neat to see. These are some elders, top left corner. I think I mentioned there was like 38 or 39-kilometer winds last October. So we were running around trying to find blankets and toques, and so the elders weren't cold. And then there's this little munchkin on the right. She had bare hands and she was right into planting. This is an aerial view of the items that were planted in front of the health clinic. Most of them are edibles. The line of I guess mulch along the parking lot, that would be windbreaks, birch trees, and willow and maple, because we get a severe north wind coming in, and it's very cold in this parking lot. In front of the road and on the other side of the other road are Saskatoon berry bushes and lots of other edibles. We're using those as windbreaks. This is a fire pit, so when there's a funeral or wake, there's a fire going in this mound. As well, this mound has sage and different medicinal plants that grow. This is our school, which is attached or just on the side of this last photo. So we've planted apple trees and cherry trees. And part of this weekend's workshop is to do some maintenance and help these trees along. We've planted all along by the bus. You'll see the bus on the top right corner, and back to the right, there are apple trees planted. And our apple trees are going to grow about 15 feet. We didn't purchase any dwarf trees. It was recommended all the bigger trees. Some of the successes and challenges. What's really important is chief and council endorsement, and I have been very fortunate, as well as you know, having the lands manager and the health director. They have been very helpful. They have provided a lot of additional financial support, and I'm very grateful to them. And CFTC, you know, has provided my position. So I think it's really important to have a dedicated staff member that works on food security initiatives. I think that could be a potential issue for First Nations in general, because I find a lot of them are the dietitian or the principal is doing food security initiatives. So, you know, they don't have a lot of time. So I'm fortunate because I can dedicate a lot of time to this project, because, you know, it's a big project to take on. Communication within the community is key. I mean, that's one of our big issues just in general. We have lots of complaints that, you know, what is chief and council doing? What is everybody doing? So I try and communicate and involve everyone, and I think that's been helpful for my project in Muskeg, or for this project. And of course, you know, finding the right person for the right job. So that was Steve. He's fit in quite well into our community. I think last year he couldn't get the backhoe. This year he just walks up and they give it to him now. So, you know, he's been able to fit in, and he's like a band member now, and everybody knows him. So, you know, he was a good fit for this project and has a lot of knowledge. I would just like to add, my lands department has approved me to take a permaculture design certificate this winter. So I'm really excited about that. And I think I'll be able to make more of a contribution, you know, when it comes to permaculture design, and even, you know, providing some information or being better knowledgeable on these principles. With sourcing local and ethical materials, I guess that refers to, you know, we have a little stockpile. The health clinic was refurbished, and there was a lot of bricks. at the front entrance. So we made sure to grab those, and I have them at the food forest, and then we're going to use them as a trail around our elders rest area. So, and I'll be showing you a picture of that shortly. So we've also, the guys went out with Steve last year, and they dug up red willow and spruce trees and choke cherry trees, and then brought them into the food forest. So we're trying to do that as well. And I know that Steve has gone, like, you know, to the local grocery stores and grabbed boxes for part of our mulch, and we were using paper that was shredded from the office as part of our mulch last year. So we're trying to you know, just stockpile anything, and we have used a lot of this stuff in our food forest. So perhaps what did not work, you know, it's hard to get volunteers and even obtain workers. I find that people don't, you know, want to work alone, and they need supervision. Even though we had lists of what to do, sometimes it was difficult. So I have taken more of an active role in the supervision part, and just to be more there for whoever is working in the garden. Like, we had an ideal candidate, but that person took another job, you know, halfway or a month in. So there's always the excuse me, staff turnover, and the training, the ongoing training of what we're doing with the wood chips and different things, and watering. Sometimes there's just things that influence, you know, funerals, wakes. We got to push back dates. The weather. There's been a lot of rain in Saskatchewan for June and a good part of July. So, you know, and I guess this could be a benefit this year for us, because we didn't have to deal with the watering of the food forest. So we did get quite a bit of rain. And that'll be one thing that we have to look at for next year, is a watering system. And then just generally, you know, the long-term vision and keeping everybody informed. It seems to go right back to communication, and just, you know, having everybody as understanding of what we're doing, and, you know, the whole team effort and the community engagement piece. So this is an aerial view of the food forest and what it looks like today. This was taken like about 2 weeks ago. So this is our elders rest area. It does not look very big, but it is 21 feet. It's a solid, awesome structure. Journeyman carpenter from Muskeg had built this, and very grateful to Lands. I think total materials and construction costs was $7,000. So, you know, again, you know, having Lands and Health, they have contributed lots of money to this project, and I'm really grateful. There's that piece of land just behind the Elders Rest area. We're planning on putting flowers, so we've been keeping that weeded. And we're going to do that in October, and there'll be flowers to attract the pollinators, and just for color and beautification till things start growing. We found just out of everything that we planted last October, there were 2 plants that maybe got cold and, you know, didn't grow. So that's a really good positive thing. In the back, there's a bit of a community garden you can see. There's tobacco, corn, and potatoes, and we have a little nursery. So that's where a lot of our white spruce trees are right now, because they were gifted from the PA Model Forest. So part of this weekend workshop, we'll probably be planting those or transferring them to other places within the food forest or at the clinic. And again, we're right on Cayen Lake. There's a little lake in Muskeg, so it's a very nice spot where this food forest is located. These are photos that were just taken 2 days ago, and we actually have grapes. That's the photo on the left. It was planted in May, this plant, and we now have grapes all of a sudden. And tobacco in the middle photo, so it's ready to be harvested. Any yellow leaves, I'll be taking that off probably tomorrow, and then I've got to hang it to dry it. This is one of our apple trees, and I would say about 15 to 20 apple trees had golf ball sized apples in the last 2-3 weeks. And they will get huge to the size of a baseball. So already, you know, what we planted last fall is flourishing and giving us a little bit of a harvest. So it's exciting, especially these grapes. There's a number of, I guess, things on my wish list, like perhaps we need a greenhouse, nursery. The other thing is, as part of phase 3, I would like to work on putting some playscapes right in the food forest. So this is just a generic photo of what could be. And yeah, hopefully that'll happen next spring and summer. So that is my presentation, and I thank you very much.
Okay, Glenna, it's done now. Share. Okay, now we need to jump over to my presentation there, and I think they mentioned before that if you have any questions, just keep them in mind, take a note, and hopefully have time after to answer the question. Okay, so hope everything's good here. You can hear me. So permaculture design, Glenna gave me quite a flattering intro there. It's been quite an experience. This is the first First Nation community I've worked with in Saskatchewan. It's starting to bud, and I've had a really good time. I like it a lot more than working in city law. Sure. So this little presentation is just about the idea of permaculture and how it can relate to food resilience, especially among First Nations communities. I've kind of merged the permaculture presentation with some of the some of the details of how we integrated it into the Muskeg. So just a little bit about me, some background. I'm not your typical Canadian, I guess. I left Saskatchewan in 2006. I was about 20 years old, and I was overseas for over a decade. So I've got some good perspectives on how different cultures live and different ways to do things, and a lot of hands-on experience. I'm more often proud than not about not getting so much formal education, but rather learning through experience. And I feel pretty good with how that worked over the years. So I thought I'd start with the logo of permaculture, and this is the egg of life and the rainbow serpent. And I don't need to explain all this. The significant aspect of this is how pretty much every culture, every traditional people on the planet has some version of this story, and they really understand the interconnectedness of everything on this planet. Whether I call it Gaia, they call it the creator. You know, there's a lot of ways to put it, and every tribe has their own story, but it's a nice to know that this system of design created by some white dudes, essentially, was learned by observing First Nations people and Aboriginal people in Australia, and we try to give credit to that as much as possible, because none of this is new knowledge. It's all learned knowledge from the past and just trying to reapply it in today's modern times with totally different problems and situations. So the word permaculture is pretty clear. It's permanent. But then the culture, this is what I found quite interesting when I first got into it, is that it's cultivation of the land, but also of intellect. And for me, permaculture is just, as soon as I got into it, I realized it was just a lifelong, never-ending journey of learning. And it's so exciting. Just keep growing and growing. Muskeg's been good with that because Glenna and the chief and council, they even are aware that it's going to develop over time. It's not just something that you put in right away and it's finished, but it's an ongoing investment. You have to observe and interact. So on the right hand of this slide, this is something I use when consulting with the community and just asking them to, think about their culture. What is it now? Like, what influences your habits, your beliefs, and your activities? Do they sustain your culture and society, or are they maybe harmful? We're just kind of trying to get them a little bit more introspective and look at what are good things in our town and what are the bad things and what we need to work on. It created some good discussion. I realized it's challenging to talk about, and some of the issues people might not be so comfortable expressing. But even if it goes on in their own mind, it's kind of we all need to reflect and think about our culture and where it's going and where it came from, how to improve it as we go along. So this is a pretty long-winded definition of permaculture, but some of the other ones are a little short and a little vague. So practical design method, applicable from the balcony to the farm, from the city to the wilderness. It enables people to establish productive environments, providing for food, energy, shelter, material, and non-material needs, as well as the social and economic infrastructures that support. Permaculture means thinking carefully about our environment and use of resources and how we supply our needs. It aims to create systems that will sustain not only for the present, but for future generations. So here we're just working on a food forest, but the bigger picture of permaculture is much broader than that. And I see it slowly getting integrated into this project. I'm not going to rush anything, but I know over time, different aspects of the community will definitely become influenced by what's happening here. And Glenna went over all that, social, health, education, all these things do get connected. It just takes a bit of time. Okay, now this is one. So I found out I had 20 minutes for my talk. So I'm going to do a little video just to give you probably my favorite one. And confused with those to inspire someone on what permaculture means. Oh, is the video not going to work? Oh, yeah.
What is permaculture? Wow. For me, permaculture is no, don't ask that one. I don't want it.
I have to think a little bit, okay? I find it very difficult, like everyone else, to define permaculture because it covers all of human living.
Permaculture is life
and can be applied across the board.
So agriculture is just one component of total system.
It covers everything we do in terms of our eating, our food, our products.
From the natural sciences through to social sciences, psychology, religion.
And our economy, which of course is a big question.
I just think it's brilliant because it's so oriented. It's about ethical living. We see through that lens.
Permaculture helps us think about and ask the right questions.
And care for Earth, care for people, and fair share. And so decisions we make have to reflect those ethics.
As permaculturists, we're out to look at ways we can design human habitat, places for people to be that actually work with nature.
How to reconnect us all to the earth awareness and understanding that we are a part of nature's cycle and that no matter what you do.
In essence, what it is how we use systems thinking, these design principles to apply to whatever you want.
I mean, everyone can learn the what behind permaculture and infuse that. It's not just about designing pieces of land, but that's a key part and will help us to live more sustainably on the earth because it shifts our practices.
So it has everything inside. You start with food, but then you want to build your own house, and then you want to teach your children, and then you want to do it with your society, and then also you want to take more care of yourself, and your spirit, and then you start knowing yourself better. So it's such a change.
It's not necessarily the destination, it's a way of thinking about how to live, how to design, how to be.
It will fulfill parts of yourself that you never imagined, and you can live the dream, and live the dream here now.
All right. Yeah. So it's pretty bold. I could go as far as saying it's a revolution. Revolution inspired by a lot of different things, but it's disguised as gardening, and that's how we get away with it. People don't pay too much attention to it because we're changing the world, but we're doing it with the soil. So the mission of permaculture is very, very simple. This is directly from the permaculture manual. The only ethical decision is to take responsibility for our own existence and that of our children. And I don't think anyone could really disagree with that. Maybe the ways we do that we could disagree on, but the overall ethic. And these are the 3 core ethics of permaculture. So in no particular order is the care for the earth, care of people, and then fair share, which is the most discussed just because it's not so blatantly obvious. But if you look at natural systems, no living thing keeps everything, even, you know, waste, poop, drop leaves, they're all a sharing of the surplus. The fruit tree produces fruit not for itself, it's for other beings. So we just try to incorporate that into our designs and our ethics. This is known as the permaculture flower, and it's just, again, highlighting the interconnectedness of everything and how the design of permaculture, it flows and it's cyclical, and you have to consider all the aspects, otherwise you'll have weak points. And I mean, we're in election right now, we look at people promise one thing, but we know it's going to lead to the detriment of another thing, and that's the typical result of our kind of divided systems where everything is a specific expertise, but nothing really connects and supports the other. Permaculture attempts to bridge all these different areas into one, or not into one, but so they can work together. So these are really there's 12 of these here. These are the design principles, and they're kind of just our template. If we can follow these, then our design and our plan should work in a sustainable and regenerative way. A lot of these are very common sense. It's just actually applying them. Like, produce no waste doesn't mean you put all your waste in the garbage can. It means that if we're, you know, breaking up our leaves, we use them on the ground. Or like, if there's scraps of wood, maybe they could be used for something else instead of tossed out. Obtaining a yield is a pretty obvious one. That's probably the most common one in the rest of the world, but it is still an important one here. Catch and store energy is critical, and when you start to realize that grass is just a different form of solar energy, because it transfers the sun into a living plant. Like if we can grow plants and then use them for organic material to build soil, that's a form of storing energy, just as solar or wind or anything like that. Observing and interacting is critical. So as this forest develops, we'll have to, and that's great that Glenna's doing a permaculture course, because it really helps how to observe, and elders are the greatest observers. If I ever have time with an elder and I'm in the right space, the amount of learning that I'm capable of, you know, gleaning off of them because they've been observing for that much longer than me is just critical. So all these different principles, when we're trying to develop a permaculture design, we need to take these into mind. Small and slow solutions is also a pretty critical one, especially with project development. You know, going huge is not always the best option. Our forest is quite big, but we're handling it. It's good. But yeah, just keep that one in mind, because it's really easy to fix a small mistake. It's a lot harder to fix a big one. The zones is a pretty important thing in permaculture. However, our site doesn't necessarily require them so much, but it will start to develop as we go. Like zone 0 would probably be now our workshop space, the elders rest area. So around that spot, we're gonna start to do more things where, say if we do the playscapes, they would likely be near there, because that's where all the elders would be resting, their parents, you know, maybe barbecuing in there. So we keep the more active, regularly visited parts of your design in that zone 0, zone 1. And then the less active but still often visited move out zone 2, 3, 4. And then zone 5 is pretty key because that's the untouched, that's leave it for nature zone. And every design should ethically have a spot where humans don't do anything other than perhaps walk through it. And because we are nature as well. And Muskeg, we're fortunate that our food forest is all fenced off, but we're on the edge of a forest and then it loops around a lake and connects with their island, which is a giant boreal forest. So we do have that zone 5, although it's not directly in our forest, our fence, it's still connected. And the willow from that zone 5 are growing into our forest, which is a wonderful windbreak and a lot of free trees that we don't need to plant. So this is just a general layout of how you would plan your site based on function and how often you go to the different zones. Very common sense. Homesteaders know this very well, old farmers. And most of you have probably worked in situations where you're walking too far, doing repetitive movements to get one thing done. You could apply this to the office space as well. Now the difference. So when I was first doing the presentation at Muskeg, there was a desire to plant an orchard, and orchards are great. They're just very singular function, right? And you can kind of see it's really pretty hard to imagine a vibrant community space among these rows of trees that are getting sprayed several times, even more than 10 times a year in some instances. Whereas this is an image of a food forest, and yeah, it's not much to compare to. It's just which one is more inviting, which one is more functional, because Glenna brought up the medicine. So in our food forest, although now it's mostly fruit trees and some windbreaks, we can start building in and adding medicinal trees and pollinators on the other layers, which we'll get into right away. Hold on, one more slide on it is this old guy here. I just did a workshop this previous weekend on food forests in Canadian situations, and the Richard Walker was leading it, and he had to move. He started a food forest just in the fruit growing region of BC, but they got tired of having all their seedlings killed off by the residue from the sprays. So if that's your solution to keeping the bugs off, from what I hear at the First Nations, they didn't really want to have a part of that. But when you have pest control such as this, native pests, insects, birds, for sure you're going to lose some of your crop, but you know, do we need 5,000 pounds of apples, or will 4,000 pounds be enough? Kind of this trade-off of, is your goal maximum production, or is it, you know, producing enough, a bit of an abundance, and also supporting the local wildlife, which we know is critical to our life as well. And First Nations know that much more than our Western society tends to. So with these couple of slides, the idea of the food forest, I had some, actually I'm gonna go back. This picture here, one of the best comments from the group at Muskeg was that this photo reminded her of the roads and how the Canadian government came through the landscape and just divided up the road into the grid system that paid no attention to the actual landscape and the hills and the rivers and the people. They just went in straight lines because that's what's easy and convenient for us. I really like to hear that feedback. It made me feel quite confident that this system would work in this culture. Another main point of a food forest is this understanding of ecological succession, and that although we complain so much about weeds, their role is to rebuild healthy ecosystems. You don't find typical, generally what we call weeds, in healthy, flourishing ecosystems. They're there to rebuild generally the destruction that we've caused. So we're dealing right now in our food forest with, it was a farmland, and then we're basically transitioning it to a forest. But I must note that if you're in like the dead of the prairies, taking an old farmland and turning it into a forest might be an extremely hard challenge, and it might not even be appropriate if you're directly in the center of the prairie. It's hard to know based on what was there in the past. Does the land want to be a forest? Is that what it's trying to achieve? And you can learn that by observing the plants and the soil and how it's transforming. But we're lucky, we're on the edge of a forest. So if this was not farmland, it would be woodland. So the nature is wanting to return it to that way, and we're now, just kind of helping speed it along. But instead of growing more plants that, say, the natural environment would love for its inhabitants, we're now incorporating a lot more plants that benefit humans and have a higher food production capability. And if you're thinking long term, the windbreaks and the climax community can also have resources. I mean, why buy lumber when you can grow your own? You can invest in hardwood and yeah, just long-term growth, which really good benefits for future generations. It's also capable in succession. Back to that layering idea. So we've planted a lot of the canopy layers in the lower tree layers, but we need to work on the ground cover and some more shrubs and herbaceous layers, which is where the medicinal comes in. And native plants, we're working more. A friend of mine, work partner Elizabeth, she's been working at the health clinic and brought in all native plants. That's her focus. And in the food forest, adding a lot more of these and pollinator habitats, and just trying to benefit and fill in all the spaces so it begins to function like a normal ecosystem. And when this happens, the weeds don't have space anymore, and they also don't have a reason to be there, because most of the weeds functions are breaking up the soil, building healthy soil, adding organic matter to try to create space for a forest. So we're doing that. We're moving it along. Yes, we'll have weeds at the start, but over time, you don't really observe a lot of weeds, healthy functioning ecosystem. So if we get all these layers filled in, which is this is where education comes in. The kids can transplant. You know, we can start propagating seeds, start more of a nursery. There's a lot of ways we can add those plants in, and they'll start happening on their own too. So it's really exciting. Like I say, it's not done when it's planted. It's an ongoing process over many years. Goals. So none of this can happen or should happen unless you define your goals very clearly. And this is a nice little graph or chart on how everything overlaps and how it's so critical to consider all aspects before determining your goals and how to determine your goals. Because sometimes your goal is not exactly a resilient goal, or it's not appropriate to where you are. And I think often we're too self-obsessed and we don't consider everything else around us when we're thinking about what we want or what we need in the future. And permaculture has some really good processes for helping define goals that also make sense where we are and benefit the earth as well as our own well-being. Yeah, defining the goals is the first step generally. So that's why we started with the consultation and working with the Food Security Committee and just getting clear on what we wanted. And community input was, like I say, part of that. So this is a slide I used with the community. Imagine you're on an island A and that's where you are now. And then you see this island B off in the distance that you really want to get to, but you need to discover how you're going to get there. You don't have a map yet. You don't know what boat you're going to use. So you need to figure out how you're going to get there. And we did use this as a brainstorming process. It's very challenging for them, and this is all fairly new concept. But in the end, this is one more example of how we tried to define our goals as a community, and just some brainstorming exercise. And I asked this question on a few different, like the purposes of a community garden, the purposes of a food forest, and tried to see how their ideas would fit in with what our intentions were. And we're getting to the end here, but these are the desired outcomes as they came out from the community, and then also the Food Security Committee. And most of these were covered by Glenna, basically, but it's a good diversity. Oh, birthday. It's a good diversity of outcomes that could come from one single space. So, you don't need to create a playground here and a park there and a garden there and a greenhouse there. You could combine everything, and more functions out of one space generally allows it to, we'll get more people interested, and yeah, should build the support from the community. And if people go there, if people enjoy the space, then I have full confidence that it will flourish. This is the original digital design of it all, just from an aerial view. I'll be honest, you need to update the trees more. There's so many went in, and it wasn't all as planned, but I need to redo this. But the road is pretty accurate still, and the shape of the road is based on the slope of the land. So when we were creating where the road went, we actually measured the contour and marked it to be flat. So when the rain falls, and it'll like no land, even though it looks flat, is flat. So when the rain falls, it'll slope somewhere, and we put the road so that rain would run into the roads and not like run across them in a way. And it's just a way of catching the rainwater and putting it into locations. And then we concentrate plantings along the edges of the road where the water collects, things like that. Yeah, I think my time is about up, and that's the aerial view you guys have seen again. Oh yeah, down in that bottom corner, which was on the webinar poster, or on the right side of this picture, is where we're going to be camping this weekend, and we have that workshop. I'm pretty excited about that. Double function for me, because I want to get a lot of work done, and I want to help share the space with people, and had a lot of interest from friends, but also just people that want to get more hands-on experience with permaculture. And again, back to how I learned, it was all doing hands-on experience with, you know, some in-class time, but then we get out there and get dirty and get our experience. And I think that's something that's lacking in our culture, is we're so focused on book learning. So I hope this place can develop as a good opportunity, a good space for more workshops like this going into the future, for the greater community, but also for Muskeg. Okay. I'm done. CFTC, you guys ready to get on the air?
Quick question. It's Michelle here. Did we thought it started at noon? We were mistaken, I guess.
Yeah, there's 3 time zones. It was a bit confusing as well. Noon or 11 in Saskatchewan, noon in Manitoba, and 1 in Ontario.
Oh, because the poster we saw on Facebook just said 12 and 1.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. But this has been recorded, so you would, if you want to jump out now, you can get the recording of it and go all on it at 1.
Okay, or we can watch the rest of it and then catch the first part of it after.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Hi, Michelle. Sorry about that.
CFTC.
Oh, wait.
Okay. So if anyone has any questions, it might be easier to type them out, but if you could try to unclick your mic.
Hi.
And
can you hear me?
ask any questions you may have to Glenna on yourself.
Hello.
No.
Hello.
Hey, anyone out there? CFTC, your bandwidth is low.
Does anyone have any questions?
Can you hear us now?
Hello?
Can you hear us now?
Yes, we can.
We can hear you.
Okay, sorry, our microphone said it was unmuted, but for some reason we couldn't talk. So, okay, thank you very much for those amazing presentations. So Nicole's going to just host the Q&A now.
Does anyone have any questions?
Dorothy, are you, make sure to unmute your microphone if you have a question.
I'm sorry that I missed the whole thing. It seemed I got the impression it was started at 12, and I missed everything. And I'm so sorry, Steve and Glenna. I'm so glad that it's recorded.
That's okay. It's confusing when Manitoba and Saskatchewan are sometimes on the same time zone and sometimes not. So that's okay, Dorothy. We'll definitely share the recording.
Okay.
And you at least have had the opportunity to visit the food forest, being that you're close by and
Yes.
in real life.
Okay, we have 2 questions on the chat there.
Okay.
I don't know, Dorothy, if you've seen the chat, but
Perfect.
click that chat button and it'll show up on the side of the screen. So Arden, I don't know, Gustafsson, how do you see this rolling out for more First Nations? Glenna, do you have second one? I can answer more, but
Steve has a business card.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're hoping. I think these projects are, you know, like really awesome. And as far as I know, Muskeg is the only one in Saskatchewan. I'm not sure in Canada, like if anybody else is doing this. There is another food forest at Big River or Ness Creek.
Yeah.
You know, but for First Nations, I think we're the first. So sky's the limit, you know, and it's a really great project. And as I say, I don't want him to leave, but he possibly is available.
Yeah. I've been looking into grants more because I kind of wanted to use Muskeg as a template and then try to find a way to replicate it in other reserves. But I'm looking into which grants and which kind of funding sources make sense. Combining it based on some of our challenges, I've thought of combining it with jobs training. So if you could get like 5 or 10 members of the community that want to do a jobs training program, then you could develop the food forest as well as train them, like plan it out, and they'll learn landscaping skills, essentially, how to lay a path, how to plant trees, how to maintain the space, and get a certificate that would help them get employment, or create their own landscaping permaculture company on reserves or something like that. But the sky's the limit. Is just getting the momentum going. This is a good project to kind of show what is possible. Yeah. And then Natalie?
Sorry, can I just add a little bit? So from, I think, CFTC's perspective too, is one of the reasons we want to have events like this is so that people can learn about these types of projects, because it is quite new and innovative and not widespread across the country. And, you know, communication and knowing what's happening and all the great initiatives, it is hard to get that information. So I think these networks are a good way. And then if communities are interested with funding that CFTC provides, they can use the funding that way. Or like you're saying, Steve, there are, I think, more and more opportunities for funding these kind of projects. And I do think the strategy of linking it to the unemployment rates and the training and youth focus and things like that are all really good ways to generate interest.
Yeah, multifunctioning, because the community gardens are great, but there's very little function often other than food. Like, people don't often go to a community garden to have fun. So like if you create a space where people go, and this food forest could have a community garden thriving within it as well, like with a multifunctioning, and that applies, makes you open to more funding, more organizations that might want to support it, because it does cross so many different boundaries. And Natalie, so how to get started? Well, that's a fun one. Okay? I guess it's, chief and council, but then also just having more of an idea of what this all entails, and observing your local area and what's appropriate there too. Muskeg is in a very good growing location in Saskatchewan. Kind of, it's in that parkland region between the prairies and the forest. So it's got really good soil and biodiversity. Depending on where you are, like up in Stony Rapids, and we're just experimenting with planting fruit trees. We don't know how it's going to go, because it's very different soil, very different climate, and no one's really done it up there. Maybe down south, it's extremely dry, windy, hot all the time. it's all possible, but it definitely there's no exact template for how to get started. But people and community, as Glenna talked about, is probably the first start. Trying to get anyone on board that likes the idea and gain the momentum that way. In permaculture, we say from patterns to details, design from patterns to details. So if you think of the big picture first, then you get down and work on the details later. You just waste all this time trying to figure out the details. The big picture is constantly shifting. Sorry, I know there's no direct answer there.
Yeah, and there can be like, you know, unlimited, you know, what could happen, will happen, and might go wrong, you know. Yeah, you just, a lot of times, you know, weather, time, just getting everything and everyone lined up can be difficult. So, you know, there's a lot of communication involved for sure. And I can't say enough about my lands manager and the health department, because they have been really supporting me financially. They've added a lot of other financial resources to help with this. Even our maintenance crew, you know, with the backhoe and the big equipment, they've been very helpful.
Yeah. Dorothy, you might want to turn off your camera unless you want to be on the recording for the whole video, or for the end. just enough. You just click the camera button and it turns off. I just see your question there. Do I need to test the soil first before I plant trees? Yes, but you can do more visual tests than you have to actually go. And Saskatchewan's really not too alternative or holistic in its soil testing. Just in my course I took, there's nowhere locally where we can get the kind of test that more naturally guided people like myself would want. You'd have to send it out of province. But for basic soil tests for planting fruit trees, it's the consistency of the soil. Is it pure sand? You'll have a challenge and you'll have to bring in lots of organic material. If it's really clay, you'll have a similar challenge. But if it's dark, nice soil, then you should be good. I wouldn't think too much about it. The more organic material that gets grown, the more life in the soil will build itself over time. And that's why we brought so much mulch. We're trying to protect the soil from the sun. We're trying to make this cool ecosystem. So all this infinite numbers of underground living organisms can help the soil for us. Because if humans do all the work, it takes forever. But all these little insects and animals and microorganisms will do it if you create that environment for them.
I was going to say, can you talk about the soil and the mulch? And...
Yeah, soil is a massive topic, but like the takeaway from the course I just did was you're not feeding the plants, you're feeding the soil. And that's massive to put into your mind. Conventional agriculture, they put the fertilizers on the plants to make them grow up big and fast and for production purposes. But if you want nutrient-dense food, you need to, like, all the plants get their nutrition from the microorganisms in the soil. So the microorganisms are actually trading with the roots of the tree. The tree takes the sun, turns it into sugars, trades it with the microorganisms and the mushroom, and then the tree gives everything they need. And it's this amazing interconnected system. So build soil, do everything you can to build healthy soil. And there's lots of information online about how to do that. Mulch is a big.
And drought?
Yeah, mulch helps a lot for drought. Regulating water in the soil. So when you get a big rain, it soaks in but doesn't evaporate really quick. It also helps regulate the roots temperature during spring and fall, when going into winter and out of winter. So if we have those big swings like we've been experiencing, like winter will be over and it'll be 20 degrees, and then for 2 weeks winter comes back, snowing and freezing. That's really hard on trees when they expect one thing and another thing comes. So mulch is just like giving them a blanket essentially, so they can handle these temperature swings much more comfortably.
Thank you for answering those questions, Steve.
Mm-hmm. No problem.
Oh, we have another one.
Oh, Ecological. Yeah. We just talked about that in my course, and I've installed one officially in Saskatoon. My major input is be sure to add a Ecological. Sorry, for people who don't know, it's a really good option when you have a lot of wood waste. We're considering it here too for mounds around the edges, but you dig a bit of a pit and then you throw in a bunch of logs and you pile them up and cover with soil. So it's like this long-term decomposing spongy garden bed, essentially. And it can work really well. The issue is when you're building your pile to add a lot of soil into it, because if it's just woody, there's not enough nitrogen to cause decomposition. So as you're building your pile, add a lot of soil. And also make sure that it's going to get soaked every year. So the one we built was in a low spot in the yard, and we directed the water from the rain roof into that Ecological mound into the bottom. So it'll fill up with thousands and thousands of liters of water, and that will then sponge up through the Ecological towards the plants on top. So it is possible, but they can be done wrong if you don't do them properly. But they're a great way. You drive over the province and you see whoever it is cutting down all the old beautiful windbreaks all over. And all I can think is we should turn them into Ecological mounds all over the province. It's just gonna sit there and dry out, and maybe they'll burn it someday. It's really sad. So making use of the old wood, yeah, it's a good way to do it. So keep them wet.
Good question.
Are there any other questions?
Sad all those trees are being burned. Yes, indeed. I just came back to Saskatchewan 4 years ago, and I can't believe just driving around. Like, it seems like every trip I take, there's another windbreak that's been cut down. And on the permaculture principles slide, there was one that said maximize the edge, and edges are where most of the action happens. So it's like, even you put up a fence and you can't cut the grass there. It's just so abundant. The weeds catch there, everything's growing there, there's no moisture. So those windbreaks were such a crucial habitat space, and they would help moderate the temperatures across the field. It's really a tragedy that we're cutting them down and just slashing them, burning them. We can change it now. We can grow them back.
All right, well,